Hello, my cosmic starbits. Welcome in to Bedtime Stories with Momma Minty. It's been a while, I know, and I hope that you can forgive me for the long stretch of time between Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 of our bedtime story. There wasn't much I could do to change that. It was a case of, just everything getting in the way. But tonight we're going to continue our story with our new playlist and picking up from where we left off with Chapter 3. For those of you who do not know what Bedtime Stories is, basically me doing my best to give you an ASMR experience of me reading you a bedtime story. So, I hope you're all tucked in and I hope you're all tucked in and enjoying your night and ready for me to read you a bedtime story as we pick up from Chapter 3 of R.J.Anderson's life. You're making the edge too thin, said Fawn. Barony scarcely heard her, all her concentration focused on chipping her new knife into shape. This was her latest of several attempts at crafting a fighting blade, but deep down she knew it would fail like all the others. The more she honed the edges, the sooner they crumbled, the sharper the point, the more readily it would snap. This is useless, she said at last, throwing the flint down. Why don't we have any real weapons? Made of metal, you mean? Asked Fawn, brushing curls of wood from the stake she was whittling. It was raining heavily, so there was little for either of them to do but sit in the east room and wait for the clouds to move on. Why should we? Why shouldn't we? There are metal things in the oak, only what's left over from the days of magic. Lanterns, bits of jewellery, a few tools, but most of that's brass. Or copper, too soft for a weapon. Anyway, the Queen doesn't like too much metal around. You never know what it might be made of. What do you mean? Cold iron, said Fawn impatiently. But when Barony still looked blank, she went on. It stops magic. If it's pure, that is. But there isn't much iron around here anymore. These days you mostly find steel. Steel, said Barony. That's iron mixed with... Gardener knows, said Fawn. All I know is that if I happen to bump into some, I can still fly afterwards, and that's good enough for me. It had never before occurred to Barony to think of flying as magical, but now she realised it must be. So we still have some magic after all. Well, it isn't much use since we can't control it, said Fawn. Now and then one of us manages to cast a spell by accident. I thought Foxglove changed size once, trying to get down a mouse hole, but it always wears off in an hour or two. She gave us a little snort and added, You can't use it to kill old wormwood, if that's what you were thinking. Barony pushed the heels of her hands against her eyes. There has to be some metal we could use, she said. Not in the oak, said Fawn, unless you'd like to march up to the house and ask the humans for it. Barony's mouth flattened as she picked up a new flint and bent once more to her work. Much as she had learned to respect Fawn, there were times when the older Fae's black humour went too far. But then a thought struck her. Did either of them really know that the humans carried the silence? After all, Barony herself ought to be dead by now, if getting close to a human was all that it took. What if Fawn had been wrong, and the disease came from some other source? In which case, going to the house for metal might not be such a bad idea at all. I need to talk to Valerian, Barony decided. A healer had treated several cases of silence by now. If anyone knew how the illness worked, she would. What would you ask of me? Said Valerian. Her manner was formal, but courteous, as she seemed only mildly surprised to find Barony at her door. Knowledge, said Barony. And what have you in offer to return? Herbs of any kind you like. It would be easy enough to pick them the next time she and Fawn went hunting. And no doubt Valerian would appreciate not having to wait for the gardeners to get around to it. Valerian's brows rose. Agreed. I'd like Cheraville if you can find some. If not, I can always use more comfrey or willow bark. Your question? Is there any way to protect yourself against the silence? None that I know, said Valerian. Then, at the look of disappointment on Barony's face, why do you ask? It's been years since Sorrel died, and you shouldn't be in any danger at your age. At my age, Barony started. You mean you have to be older? Quite a bit older, I'd say. I'd hesitate to give an exact number, but so far all the Oakenfolk I've seen taken by the silence have been born well before the Sundering. She gave a sad smile, even if they were too confused to remember it. But they all had some contact with humans, said Barony. How much does it take? Valerian frowned. I beg your pardon? It's just... Barony hesitated, then plunged in. Now that I'm spending so much time outside, I'm afraid that one of these days I might end up crossing paths with a human again, so I need to know how serious... What makes you think the silence has anything to do with the humans? Valerian sounded genuinely perplexed. You mean it doesn't? I can't think of how it would, said Valerian. None of the Oakenfolk I've treated had ever gone near a human, at least not in my lifetime. In fact, one of my earliest cases was so terrified of humans that she refused to open her window even in summer, for fear of seeing one. And Daisy was such a timid little thing, I can't imagine she'd ever been different even before she'd lost her magic. Barony sat against the doorframe, relieved. So it wasn't true. This fig she'd grown up believing her instincts had been right, and Fawn was wrong. Which meant that as long as she didn't let the humans catch her, she could sneak right into their house and look for metal, and no one would ever know. Are you alright? Asked Valerian. Do you need to lie down? No, said Barony, I'm fine. Beyond Barony's window, the oaken wild lay shrouded, a silver of moon barely visible in the clouded, streaked sky. Leaning on the sill, Barony started out across the garden, her stomach tight with anticipation. Even if she could find some shard or snippet of metal inside the house, could she really escape with it undetected? And if the worst were to happen and she was caught, what might the humans do to her? Barony drew a deep breath and let it out. Then she climbed up onto the windowsill and dived headfirst into the darkness. Her translucent wings snapped open, and she glided down across the surface of the lawn, bare feet almost brushing the grass. At this hour, most of the Oakenfolk were in bed. She paused and glanced back over her shoulder just in case if anyone knew she was outside at night alone. But the great tree's trunk remained dark. Its windows closed, reassured Barony. Reassured, Barony turned and resumed her flight towards the house. As its grey bulk loomed up in her path, her resolve began to falter, and for a moment she almost turned aside. She reminded herself what she had come for. Metal. The humans have metal, and managed to carry on. Soon, the lawn beneath her gave way to stone pavement, and she drew herself up sharply, landing just outside the house's back entrance. A pair of doors inset with glass panes towered above her. Glowing with muted light, what would she find on the other side? Summoning courage, she pressed her face to the bottom pane and peered in. At first, she could make out only dim shapes. She cupped her hands against the glass and squishing through the sheer curtains, what she saw then made her gasp, and she let her hands drop. Stunned, the ugly stone house where the human monsters lived inside was beautiful. Never in her life had she seen such magnificently crafted furniture, with its fluid curves and dark oak polished to a sheen. The oak's finest tapestries were crude compared to the pattern of twining leaves that covered the human sofa, and no hand-knotted rug of winks could rival the plush carpet that flowed across the floor. Even the walls were impossibly smooth and straight. Were they really painted blue? Or had it just been a trick of the light? Wait, the light! Where did it come from? She had seen no fire, no candles, yet the whole room shone with radiance. Barony darted back to the window, intent. Ah, there was the source. A pair of lamps set on either side of the sofa. But how could the flames inside them burn so steadily? And why did their paper shades not catch a light? Magic, she thought in dismay. The humans must have magic. Barony sat down heavily on the doorstep. She knew now that the humans could not be monsters. They might still be dangerous. They were not animals. Living by mere instinct, they were intelligent. They were people. All at once a shadow passed over her. She leapt up in panic before realizing that she was still safe. The dark shape remained on the far side of the door. In fact, with such bright light coming from inside the house, and nothing but darkness in the gardens, where she stood, it would be difficult for the humans to see her unless they were to look. Silently rebuking herself for her cowardice, she crouched by the window again. Did you see? The voice sounded hollow from the other side of the glass. We had a letter from Paul today. The speaker was an older female. Her hair a loose cap of brown curls streaked with silver. She picked up a tray from the tea table and padded out of sight again, adding as she went, "He's sounding much happier lately. I wonder if he's met someone." They speak our language, thought Barony in amusement. How could they have lived so close to us for so many years and we never knew? I doubt that, said a deeper voice, and Barony craned her neck to see a second human enter the room and sit down in one of the armchairs. She frowned a moment, bemused by a square jaw, flat chest, and heavy hands. Then she realized that the two humans were a mated pair. And this must be the male. What a strange-looking creature he was. But he also reminded her of the boy she had met climbing the oak all those years ago. Did he live in the house too? Well, anyway, he's enjoying the choir, offered the woman, and they've made him captain of the rowing team this year. Beatrice, said the man, waving a folded piece of paper at her, I can read. His mate made a chuckling noise and was silent. Eventually the man let the page fall to his lap and leaned back in his chair with a sigh. Wait for Christmas, he said dolefully. Oh, George, he's young. At 16, you would have given up on the opportunity to go to Paris just to sit at home with your parents. At least he'll be well looked after and we'll have him for New Year. I suppose. He tossed the envelope onto the tea table. It skidded across the surface and tumbled to the floor. Barony read the address written on it quickly. George and Beatrice McCormick. Then ducked back into the shadows as the man approached. Do you need help with those dishes? He asked, stooping to retrieve the letter. I'll dry up if you like. All right, said the woman. And then, as if it were nothing, she added, thanks. Barony took a step back, appalled. How could the human thank her mate just like that? Putting herself forever in his debt, all for the sake of a few dishes? On the other hand, she realized as the shock subsided, the man had seemed just as unconscious of his own strange behavior, offering to help without being asked for it, and not even taking the time to bargain. Did he really value his own services so little? Wasn't he afraid that his mate would take advantage of him? Or was it possible these two humans had reached some sort of understanding and no longer needed to bargain with each other at all? Part of her wanted to stay and find out, but she had wasted enough time already. She could see no useful metal here, and she dared not go into that room in any case. With a last wistful glance through the glass, Barony backed up a few steps and launched herself up to the next window. She flitted from kitchen to dining room, to the top level of the house and down again, amazed and fascinated by the things she glimpsed inside. But nowhere did she see anything like a fairy-sized knife. Eventually, however, she found a room that looked more promising. It was dimly lit, but as she peered through the gap in the curtains, she could see what appeared to be a study. The walls were lined with bookshelves, while across from her stood a desk with papers stacked upon it, and there, beneath the radiance of the swan-necked lamp, sat an earthenware pot holding a few pens, a ruler, and... "Oh!" she whispered irreverently. At first glance it looked like a spear, a pole of gleaming silver, just a little shorter than Barony herself. But instead of the diamond-shaped spearheads that she and Fawn carved, it bore a long, angled blade. The point looked wickedly sharp, and Barony clapped her hands with excitement. If she could pull that blade free of its shaft, it would make a perfect knife. The room stood deserted. She had her opportunity, if only she could find a way inside. Barony crouched, jammed her hands into the crack beneath the window, and yanked upwards. For a moment, she felt nothing except the sting of scraped knuckles, and she feared that it might be locked. But then came a creak, and the window shifted. It took a few more teeth-gritting efforts. At last she made a gap wide enough to squeeze through. Now was her last chance to turn back. At present she was safe, the humans nowhere in sight, but once she entered the house, anything could happen. If they had magical lights, they might have magical traps as well. Was it worth the risk? She would just go in a little way at first, she told herself. As she lay down upon the sill, that way she might still have time to escape if anything went wrong. Wriggling through the gap, she clambered to her feet on the far side and waited, every muscle tensed. But nothing happened, and she began to wonder if the humans might not be so magical after all. Her sensitive wings quivered against her back. Eager to taste the air, she hesitated and spread them wide and glided down to the desk. With both hands, she seized the knife on its silver pole and tugged. It lifted easily, too easily, for as if it came free, the whole container tipped over. Scrambling to stay on her feet as pens and pencils clattered about her, Barony did not see the worst of the danger until it was too late. The earthenware pot tumbled off the edge of the desk and crashed to the floor below. "What was that?" exclaimed a woman's voice from the other room, and her mate replied, "It sounded like it came from the study." Footsteps in the corridor, too fast, too close. There was no time to reach the window. She had to find a place to hide. Barony ran to the other side of the desk, looking frantically in all directions, seeing below her a basket half filled with crumpled papers. She hurled the knife into the point first, then leaped in after it. She had just time to crouch down and tug a scrap of paper over her head before she heard a snap and the room flooded with light. "What was it, George?" asked the woman. "Oh, something knocked over my pens," the man called. A mouse, I suppose." He paced around the desk. His shadow darkened the basket and Barony cringed. "Oh God," his mate sounded. "Oh good," his mate sounded relieved. "As long as that's all, I'll put on the traps before we go to bed." Said the man dubiously, and Barony heard a scraping noise followed by clinks as he picked up the pot from the floor and dropped his writing tools back into it. Then he put out the lights and left the room, shutting the door behind him. Barony pressed her face against her knees, swallowing bile. He had come so very close to her hiding place, so close that she could smell him. But by the gardener's mercy, he had not scented her. She must get out of the house at once. Breathing hard, she flung herself from one side to the other of the wastebasket, until it tipped over, showering her with crumpled wads of paper. Then she dragged her stolen knife over to a thin beam of moonlight, filtering in through the curtains, and began to examine it. The blade was loose. Jiggling in its socket, she fiddled with the shaft until she figured out how to twist it apart. And her new knife dropped into the floor at her feet. Finally, she had the perfect weapon, a slim silver triangle lighter than flint, stronger and more resilient than bone. Its far end bore a slotted tab where it fitted into the barrel, a perfect core for a hilt. Leaving the two pieces of the barrel laying next to the overturned basket, Barony crawled out to the window and flew back to the oak, her glittering prize clenched between her teeth. That night, she didn't sleep at all. And while Barony won't sleep at all tonight, I do hope that you, my cosmic starbits, will. I wish you all sweet dreams. I wish you all peaceful rest. Good night, my cosmic starbits. Hi there! I just want to say a wonderful thank you at the end of the video here to my beautiful Patreon supporters, those being Atmisk, Melina, and Helia the Fox. Thank you all so much for your wonderful support. I appreciate you. You guys are the best. Till next time.